Bom dia, meus amigos, sejam todos bem-vindos hoje a mais uma transmissão em nosso canal Will PTV. Hoje estou trazendo para vocês a continuação então aí da missão AXIOM-3. E hoje, né, vamos aí acompanhar toda a fase aí de aproximação e acoplagem então da Dragon na Estação Espacial Internacional. Lembrando que esta missão então teve início aí a sua jornada no dia 18 de dezembro, 18 de janeiro, né, de 2024, né, com o lançamento então sendo realizado com sucesso no complexo de lançamento então número 39A no Centro Espacial Kennedy, nos Estados Unidos. E hoje então aí vamos acompanhar aí a chegada então aí da nave Dragon então na Estação Espacial Internacional. Lembrando então que esta tripulação é formada aí pela equipe totalmente europeia, com os países participantes da Espanha, Michael López-Alegría, o comandante; da Itália, o piloto Walter Villadei; da Espanha, não, da Turquia, temos o nosso especialista da missão, Alper, Gezeravcı; e da Suécia, Marcus Wandt. Né, eles vão ficar então aí na Estação Espacial Internacional por 2 semanas. E eles irão aí conduzir cerca de 30 experimentos científicos aí em microgravidade com base então na fisiologia humana e também aí na parte industrial. Estamos aguardando contato lá com o Centro Espacial Houston, no Centro Espacial Johnson, né, em Houston, aí onde fica então o centro de controle da Estação Espacial Internacional. E ontem, né, pela noite de ontem, aí também tivemos a tentativa aí de lançamento aí pela Spacex na missão Starlink, mas deu scrub novamente. A nova tentativa aí será divulgada ainda, né? Não temos data, tá, para a nova tentativa de lançamento. E ontem também tivemos aí o pouso realizado pela JAXA, né, na Lua, aí com o Slim. Né? Tivemos aí a transmissão aí ao vivo. Né, estamos aguardando então aí contato com o Centro Espacial Johnson para a transmissão então aí diretamente lá da Estação Espacial Internacional. Deixa eu ver aqui só uma coisinha aqui rapidinho. Tá tudo em ordem. Tudo em ordem. E, portanto, estamos aí com a nossa transmissão sendo iniciada aí em conjunto com a NASA, ESA, AXIOM. 5 países: Turquia, Espanha, Estados Unidos, Itália, Suécia, juntos aí, então aí, para a missão tripulada AXIOM-3. Agora, neste momento, então aí, iniciamos aí, então, a nossa transmissão para a missão então de acoplagem, aproximação e acoplagem da nave Dragon na Estação Espacial Internacional. Marcos Villadei, Alper Gezeravcı, Marcos Wandt e Alegria e Marcos López-Alegría. Nossa tripulação aí da AXIOM-3. Então aí na Estação Espacial
And to our continued coverage of AXIOM Mission 3, also known as AX3.
Então aí nossa
Hello,
missão aí
I'm John
juntamente com a
Rackham, Spacesuit
SpaceX,
Ventilation Lead for AXIOM
NASA,
Space, based in Houston, Texas.
AXIOM,
And I'm Kate Tice, Senior Quality Systems Engineering Manager here at SpaceX. This webcast is a joint broadcast between NASA, SpaceX, and AXIOM Space, and we're going to be talking you through the events of Dragon approaching and docking with the space station and carry our coverage through to the welcome ceremony that awaits the crew once they're on board the space station.
Olhos voltados agora para
The AX3 mission officially
AXIOM-3.
started on
Então lembrando
Thursday,
que esta missão
January
teve o
18th, when the
início
AXIOM crew lifted
aí
off from
no
Kennedy
dia
Space Center's
18
historic pad
de
39A
janeiro
at 4:49 p.m. Eastern
de
Time.
2024
A
aí
four-person,
com
all-European
o
crew
lançamento
will
então aí
experience
do
up to
Falcon
14
9
days
Dragon
on board the International Space Station.
aí na
The crew
Centro
inside
Espacial
Dragon Freedom is
Kennedy
now in position just
nos
outside
Estados
the
Unidos.
keep-out sphere around the International Space Station, approximately 420 kilometers above Earth.
Lembrando que então que a
They are awaiting the
acoplagem
approach
então aí da
initiation burn that will be the
Dragon
first of
então
several
está
steps that
prevista aí para
incrementally guide
acontecer
them
às
to the
7
International
horas e
Space Station.
44 minutos.
And the Crew 7
Pelo horário
Dragon
de Brasília.
spacecraft, known as Endurance, will be there to greet Dragon Freedom when it arrives. Dragon Endurance docked with the space station back on August 27th, 2023 at 9:16 a.m. Eastern Time for its 6-month stay. So very soon, we're going to have 2 Dragons up at the station. With that, let's head over to NASA's Gary Jordan for a closer look at Dragon's flight to the International Space Station. Hey, Gary.
Lembrando que o nome desta nave da Dragon
Hey, Kate. Hey, John. So great to be with you to welcome Dragon Freedom and the AX3 crew aboard the International Space Station. I'm here at the NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Teams here in joint operations with the teams over with you in Hawthorne, working together to bring Freedom and the crew to dock with the International Space Station. We are just minutes away from the approach initiation burn to take us
Então, nesse
into
momento
the
já foi
approach ellipsoid.
iniciado
Teams have
o
pulled go
procedimento
for that
então aí
and
da
have tested out the big
da
loop
queima então aí
communications.
para
But of
a
course, the journey
aproximação.
to get here is has been quite a journey since
Então a
launching
fase
on
então de aproximação
January
aí
18th. It all
vai
started
Dragon
with
com a
the
Estação
phase
Espacial
burn, the first
Internacional
of
já
5
foi
major burns
iniciada aí com
to
a
bring
queima.
Dragon Freedom closer to the International
Primeiro
Space
ponto aí
Station.
de ignição
Dragon
aí
raised
dos
its orbit
motores
using the Draco thrusters
da
over the past
Dragon.
day as it chases down the space station. After that, the boost burn took place. Boost burn put our crew in an orbit where Dragon's apogee, or the highest point, was 10 kilometers lower than the station.
SpaceX here.
For 010 completed, all fuel suited and set.
Copy that. Completion of suit don procedure for all crew.
Pilot Walter Villadei confirming that the crew is suited and in position for that approach initiation burn expected here in just about 6 minutes. This is one burn of several that has brought the crew closer to the station. We reviewed the phase burn,
Estamos
and
então
of course
aí
the
indo
boost
bem
burn
até
was
o
the one
momento aí
after that
com
that brought
a fase
the Dragon
inicial
to
de
the 10-kilometer
aproximação com a
point that's
Estação
lower than the
Espacial
station, or at least the Dragon's
Internacional.
apogee. From there was just 3 major
E
burns
como
left
vocês podem
before
observar, né, o
integrated
diagrama
operations
e
in Dragon's final
aproximação.
approach. After boost burn was the close burn. The close burn brought Dragon on roughly a co-elliptic
aproximação aí
orbit with the
ganho
International
de
Space Station. So that means
altitude.
it was maintaining that 10 kilometers lower than the station the entire way around Earth. That's in contrast to only being 10 kilometers lower than the station during the just the apogee, or the highest point achieved by the boost burn.
Estamos
8
aí
hours
então nesse
after that
momento
was the transfer burn.
ao vivo aí
Executed the fourth
pelo
major
horário de
maneuver,
Brasília, 6
where
horas
we raised Dragon's
e 6
apogee, or the highest
minutos,
point of its orbit, to just
aí
be
do
2.5
dia
kilometers
20 de
lower
janeiro
than
de
the International Space
2024.
Station. Finally, we rounded everything out with that
sábado,
final co-elliptic burn
aí acompanhando
to once
então
again
aí
maintain
a
that
parte de
consistent orbit
aproximação
lower than the station at that
e a
2.5
chegada
kilometer point. Now that final
da
co-elliptic
nave
burn
Dragon
executed
na
and brought
Estação
Dragon just a little
Espacial
slower than
Internacional.
expected, so we'll be tracking a docking time a little later than originally advertised. Right
Pela
now, we're
missão
aiming for
AXIOM-3
4:40 a.m. Central Time. And of course, we're tracking towards that approach initiation burn in just about 5 minutes. Now that's the final stages of Dragon's rendezvous with the space station. It's also where, like I mentioned at the top, we start integrated operations between the Dragon control teams here in Hawthorne, as well as the space station flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston. The teams will transition to integrated operations have transitioned to integrated operations roughly 45 minutes prior to approach initiation. So during the approach, SpaceX flight controllers will work in tandem with the NASA team here in Houston to activate and test out a number of systems on Dragon, including the bidirectional communications with the C2V2 system, which stands for Common Communications for Visiting Vehicles, and sets up a data stream from Dragon to this station, giving another path for Dragon's telemetry to come to the ground and give an additional command capability to astronauts aboard the station. They'll also maneuver Dragon to the proper attitude and initialize the navigation sensors used for the methodical approach to station. Now we're tracking down to approximately 3:10 a.m. Central Time, where the Draco thrusters will fire on Dragon for the approach initiation burn. And that brings Dragon from about 2.5 kilometers below the station and just 7 kilometers behind it. Then it will swing Dragon up until it's about a quarter mile, which is about 400 meters directly below station. So this maneuver will also move Dragon inside one of 2 checkpoints around the station that requires a set of go-no-go poles with the different control teams. The first checkpoint is called the approach ellipsoid, as you might hear it called, the AE. It's an imaginary shape measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers, essentially a large 3-dimensional oval. Before Dragon is given permission to move inside that approach ellipsoid, the capsule is configured to be on what's known as a 24-hour safe trajectory. This means that if Dragon lost all control to the thrusters, it would be at least 24 hours before its trajectory would move inside that approach ellipsoid. Now, once Dragon arrives at the 400-meter mark below the station, it'll be on what's called waypoint 0. This will be the first checkpoint during our approach. The vehicle can hold there at 400 meters, but if all systems check out,
aí após essas
we'll continue
subidas
on
de
to
órbita,
waypoint
né?
1.
Aí temos aí o nosso
Now, NASA
primeiro
and SpaceX teams will do a go-no-go poll
ponto zero, né,
to
de
move Dragon
aproximação
inside
final, a
what's called the
400
keep-out sphere,
metros
another checkpoint at
da
about
estação.
the 200-meter radius mark. Flight controllers use this to monitor
Depois aí o
all
nosso segundo
arriving and
ponto,
departing
200
vehicles.
metros.
It's another
E aí,
chance to confirm
nosso
all the
terceiro
guidance,
ponto,
navigation, and control systems are working correctly on Dragon
o
before moving closer to station.
ponto 2,
Carries a similar requirement
a
on
20
the
metros,
orbital
e aí a
trajectory
nossa
that if Dragon were to somehow
acoplagem
lose control of the
final.
thrusters, and the space station would be in a safe for 4 orbits, or about 6 hours rather than 24 hours required for the approach ellipsoid. Now, from waypoint 0 to waypoint
Depois
1,
do
it'll swing
ponto
out and in front of the
0, né,
station,
temos aí
arriving
o
at a
ponto 1,
distance of
né,
about
220,
220
né,
meters.
metros da
At this
estação.
point, it'll be on what's called the docking axis. It means it's directly in front of that docking point.
Depois
The
aí
crew
vamos ter
today
o
in
segundo
Dragon Freedom
ponto
are headed to the
de
forwardmost
aproximação
port
final,
of
aí
the
a
station,
20
the Node 2
metros.
forward port. That's where Dragon docked for the crewed missions, many of
E
the crew
depois
missions
o
so far,
contato aí,
and
com a
where one
acoplagem
of the 2
na
international
Estação
docking
Espacial
adapters are located, the other being the
Internacional.
zenith or space-facing side. Now, once Dragon is only 20 meters
Nesse
away,
momento, então, a
it'll be at
Dragon,
what's called waypoint 2.
ela está fazendo,
The
então,
spacecraft
a parte
focuses on aligning its
inicial
docking
de
system with the International
aproximação.
Docking Adapter. Now, as we get closer to that
com
docking ring, the
aí
International Docking Adapter, we may hear
queima
the
de
call
seus
out CHOP.
a
This
primeira
stands for
ponto
Crew
de ignição
Hands-Off
aí de
Point,
seus
a
motores, né,
little less than
para
30 seconds before
ganho
docking.
de
At this point,
altitude.
any aborts would have to be done automatically by Dragon. Now, after we hear that call, we are just
Então, a primeira
meters
fase, então,
away
de
from
aproximação.
contacting the International Docking Adapter, and that's the moment we are waiting for. We're tracking 4:40 a.m. Central Time today when our crew arrives at the space station. Dragon will fly in and make contact with that IDA, and that's called a soft capture. The soft capture ring will then retract until the sensors indicate it's time for 12 hooks to drive into place and give us that hard capture and firmly secure Dragon to its new home on the space station. From there, NASA astronauts Laurel O'Hara and Jasmine Mogbelli will manually pressurize the vestibule, the area in between Dragon Hatch and Station Hatch, and meanwhile, umbilicals will provide power and data and audio communications between the station and Dragon. we'll see some leak checks, and then the hatch opening, which will just come a few less than 2 hours, is what we're tracking now after docking. But right now, we're just seconds away from initiating that approach initiation burn, and we'll stand by for confirmation of that burn.
Lembrando, né, que a Dragon então vai fazer a sua acoplagem.
In approach initiation. Drago thrusters are
aí
now
às
firing.
7h44 da manhã. Então nesse momento aí a Dragon está fazendo então a sua fase inicial de aproximação. Estamos aguardando imagens. Estamos aí então no período de perda de comunicação, né, que é normal.
Teams are confirming that the trajectory has converged onto waypoint 0. This is an indicating of a good and approach initiation burn. We should hear confirmation reported up to the crew momentarily.
Nesse momento aí estamos indo bem aí até o momento. Até o momento. Estamos aí então acompanhando a fase inicial de aproximação da Dragon com a Estação Espacial Internacional.
Again, waypoint 0 is a mark that's roughly 400 meters directly below the International Space Station. At this point, the Dragon is inside the approach ellipsoid, but just outside what's called the keep-out sphere.
Dragon SpaceX, we had a nominal approach initiation maneuver, and a reminder that if our C2V2 link is lost for 10 minutes without ground action going forward, Dragon will perform a breakout. And you've got timers available in your event details to follow along.
SpaceX Dragon on the big loop pickup.
And copy Dragon, just reiterating on the big loop, that was a successful approach initiation burn and proceeding into approach 0 shortly.
Para quem está chegando aí agora na nossa transmissão, né, sejam todos bem-vindos. Estamos então acompanhando a fase de aproximação aí com a Estação Espacial Internacional.
Now, you heard that communication on what's called the Big Loop. This was coordinated ahead of our coverage today. Once the Dragon is within the vicinity of the International Space Station, the Dragon, the SpaceX teams in Hawthorne, as well as the teams here in Houston, the NASA teams coordinate a single communication loop where the teams in both control centers in Houston and in Hawthorne, as well as the two flying spacecraft, including the SpaceX Dragon and the International Space Station, all communicate on a single loop. You heard that confirmation, everybody checking in on that good approach initiation burn. Now again, the approach initiation burn takes us towards a trajectory to converge with what's called waypoint 0. This is a marker 400 meters directly below the International Space Station. Along the way, it'll cross what's called the approach ellipsoid. This is another imaginary marker that has its own, that indicates flight rules and requirements for both of the control teams as well as the astronauts flying both spacecraft.
E segundo ponto, antes do contato a 20 metros da Estação Espacial.
The approach ellipsoid. Now, along the way to waypoint 0, we'll be checking that trajectory and can perform what's called a mid-course maneuver. This will make sure that the Dragon is converging and continues to converge on that waypoint 0, as we're seeing now with the current trajectory. Once it reaches that waypoint 0 marker, we'll likely see Dragon continue along the way. It can hold at the waypoint 0 marker, but what we see most commonly is to move
Estamos
right
aí
past it,
aguardando as
execute a
imagens
short maneuver
aí
to swing out from right
da
below the
Dragon
station at that
voltar.
400-meter marker to right in front at that
Estamos ainda
docking
com
axis as waypoint 1.
promete então
That
a
sets us
ideia
up
da
right in front of the
comunicação em
docking axis
vídeo.
where Dragon continues to move in closer and closer for that docking. Again, we're tracking 4:40 a.m. Central Time.
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon to ground, giving you the go to begin suit leak check procedure for 0.011.
SpaceX, Dragon on Dragon to ground, in work.
Part of the procedures for reaching this milestone of approach initiation, all 4 crew members inside Dragon Freedom donned those SpaceX launch and entry suits that provide an extra layer of protection of pressure should there be any indication of a leak inside the cabin, just as a safeguard measure. But all 4 crew members are currently suited up and in their respective seats, and we're in this position ahead of that approach initiation burn. Now, the procedures have the crew suited and in those seated positions with their umbilicals plugged in to provide cooling, as well as communication from the suits and the communication devices inside the helmets through the Dragon to communicate on these loops. However, we still have yet to do those leak checks, another verification. Now, the suits are worn for the most dynamic parts of Dragon's flight to the International Space Station, including, of course, the launch, and then what they are preparing for now, which is the docking. After that approach initiation burn, there's plenty of time to prepare and perform those leak checks. We're expecting a waypoint 0 arrival in approximately 40 minutes from now. Of course, we do have the ability to execute that mid-course maneuver. If we do execute it, we can expect it in about 20 minutes. Plenty of time for the crew to perform those leak checks.
Então aí para quem está chegando agora na nossa transmissão, estamos aí acompanhando a fase de aproximação aí da Dragon até o ponto 0, aí com a fase final, iniciando então a fase final de aproximação aí a 400 metros da Estação Espacial Internacional. Né? Lembrando que a Dragon então, de hoje aí é composta então aí pela tripulação da AXIOM-3, né? Missão privada, conjunto então aí com a SpaceX, AXIOM, NASA e ESA. Né? Então aí estamos acompanhando então a fase de aproximação, então aí até o ponto 0 de aproximação.
Dragon, we copy, and you are go to initiate suit leak check.
You're seeing a view of the flight control teams in Hawthorne. These are the SpaceX team that are supporting the flight of Dragon Freedom and the AXIOM crew
E
inside.
aí, portanto, temos imagens da Estação Espacial Internacional, da Dragon, neste momento. Aí temos imagens, então, aí da Dragon.
To proceed towards some of the next milestones.
Da missão
Expected
AXIOM-3.
if we end up executing it in about 18 minutes.
Então já temos
Arrival at
imagens.
waypoint 0 in 38 minutes. What you're seeing now is a live view from the International Space Station. We have a tally-ho of Dragon Freedom and the AXIOM crew inside.
Então que essa nave, então, na verdade, é a Dragon Freedom. Tá? Não,
The Dragon is approximately 4 kilometers, is what you're looking at now.
Esta
4
aí é
kilometers
Freedom.
away from the International Space Station. Space Station is orbiting in an orbital daytime as well as Dragon. We're just east off the coast of Argentina on the South Atlantic Ocean. A great view for NASA astronauts Laura O'Hara and Jasmine Mobelli, who are conducting the monitoring operations. Again, they
Lembrando
have
que a
They
Os
have the
astronautas da
necessary
NASA,
tools
então,
to
Jasmine
see
Montgomery
the
e
range
Laura
and
O'Hara,
performance of
né,
the
estão aí
Dragon
fazendo
vehicle
a
and monitor its approach
condução, então, aí
and
do
ensure its
monitoramento
safe
da
arrival aboard the International Space
da
Station. They,
aproximação, então, da
along
Dragon.
with the flight control teams here in Houston, as well as the teams over in Hawthorne, all working together with the crew inside Dragon
Então, aí a
Freedom,
acoplagem então está
waiting
prevista
for the
para
arrival
acontecer às
and monitoring these
7h44
delicate operations.
da manhã, pelo horário de Brasília. Então, aí
Again, we're tracking 4:40
próximos à
a.m.
costa,
as
então, da
our arrival and
Argentina.
contact with the forward port of Harmony. That's on the very front of the International Space Station. That's where Dragon
Nós
Freedom
temos
will
imagens
remain
aí de
docked
mais
for
perto, então, da
14-day
Dragon
stay aboard
agora,
the
neste
International
momento.
Space Station. Laurel and Jasmine will work in tandem to open up the hatches and pressurize the what's called vestibule.
É
It's the
importante aí,
space in
novamente,
between
imagens
where
da
Dragon
Dragon,
arrives and
aí
the hatch
vista
of Dragon and
da
the hatch
Estação
of the International
Espacial
Space Station.
Internacional.
That
Aquele pontinho
space,
branco
that
ali que vocês estão
vestibule
vendo,
area is currently at vacuum.
né?
So
Então,
they're
aí
bringing
é a
up the pressure
cápsula
to match
Dragon.
the pressure of the International Space Station as well as Dragon. It's what we expect, is what we see here on sea level, 14.7 psi. It'll be a slow and methodical pressurization. There is some fluctuations that occur during pressurization due to thermal, just to make sure it's thermally stabilized and we're getting a good read on that pressure. So we'll do that slowly and methodically before opening up the hatch. What you're seeing is a zoomed-in view from the station's external cameras. We're following along. You're seeing some of the features of Dragon.
And SpaceX, we see 4 good leak checks.
SpaceX Dragon, we do confirm, we see the same.
Muito obrigado aí a todos, né, que estão deixando aí o like na transmissão.
Confirmation that we have 4 good suit leak checks. This
Muito
just
obrigado.
verifies that the crew continues to be ready for some of the next major milestones. We are well on our way to arriving
Né,
at the
pelo horário de
International
Brasília
Space
agora
Station
são
later
6
today.
horas e
And of course, we're
23
working together.
minutos.
We're here in NASA's International
Estamos aí,
Space
então,
Station
aí
Flight
com a
Control Room
fase de
in
aproximação aí
Houston,
com a
Texas.
Estação
But we are
Espacial
working in tandem
Internacional
with the
até o
crew,
ponto zero aí
flight control teams
de
that you have over in
aproximação,
Hawthorne. Let's go back
a
over to Hawthorne with
400
Kate and John
metros
to check in
de
on the
distância
crew and what's
horizontal.
happening over there. Kate and John.
Excellent words, Gary. Thank you very much. Yeah, as you can see there on your screen, that is a beautiful shot of Dragon with our 4 AXIOM crew members inside. And with that, while we wait for Dragon and the AX-3 crew's arrival at the space station, let's go ahead and meet that crew that's on board. The commander of our flight today, Michael
E mais uma vez, né,
López-Alegría,
então aí
or
conhecendo
MLA,
a
is no
tripulação,
stranger to AXIOM missions,
Michael
Dragon, or the space
López-Alegría,
station. AX-3
nosso
marks his
comandante
6th
aí
mission
da
to space,
missão.
having completed 3
Ele é,
space shuttle flights
ele é
and
da
a Soyuz
Espanha,
mission
mas
as
ele
a
também tem
NASA
nacionalidade
astronaut prior to commanding
americana.
AX-1 with AXIOM Space. Today, when not in low Earth orbit, MLA serves
Então
as
já
AXIOM
participou aí
Space's chief
de outras
astronaut.
missões anteriores, né, aí
Our
na
pilot on
Estação
today's
Espacial
flight,
Internacional.
Colonel
Nosso
Walter
piloto, Walter
Villadei, from the
Villadei,
Italian Air Force, is taking his
ele é
inaugural trip to low Earth orbit.
da Força
Villadei
Aérea
currently
Italiana.
serves in the
Ele é o
Italian
nosso
Air Force
piloto de
and
hoje
as
e ele já
head of the
participou então
Italian
aí
Air
da
Force's
missão
representative
anterior
office
aí
in the
da
United States.
Virgin
He
Galactic.
has completed cosmonaut training as a space engineer, participated in multiple analog training missions, and flown a variety of aircraft and missions as an active flight engineer in the Italian Air
Então aí o
Force.
Walter Villadei, ele já participou da Virgin
Our
Galactic.
third crew member for today's mission is
O
Mission
nosso
Specialist
primeiro
Alper
especialista da
Gezeravcı.
missão aí é o
Alper is the
Alper
first Turkish astronaut
Gezeravcı,
to go to space.
aí da Turquia.
With 15 years of experience across a myriad of aircraft for the Turkish Air Force, Gezeravcı got his start in the Air Force Academy in
Também da
Istanbul,
Força Aérea
Turkey,
Turca.
and earned a master's degree from the U.S. Air Force Institute of Technology. He then flew as a commercial airline captain for several years before returning to duty in the Turkish Air Force.
And finally, we have
E o
mission
nosso
specialist
segundo
Marcus
especialista
Wandt,
da
a
missão,
lieutenant
Marcus
colonel in the
Wandt,
Swedish Air Force.
aí da
In
Suécia.
November of
Também da
2022,
Força Aérea
Marcus was selected by the European
Sueca
Space
aí também.
Agency as an astronaut reserve. However, with the AX-3 mission, he now becomes the first project astronaut in ESA's history, a new designation within their ranks.
Então aí temos aí a nossa tripulação.
So, If you couldn't tell
da
by all of
AXIOM-3.
those
Aí estão
wonderful
eles.
descriptions, this is really an incredible crew. They are so well prepared
Nesse momento, a nossa
for
tripulação se
spaceflight,
dirige
even though only
rumo
one of them has
aí
been to
à
space
acoplagem
before.
na
They're
Estação
all really
Espacial
well trained, and
Internacional.
all these years of experience really speak for themselves.
It really
Lembrando
does,
que a
and it really just
acoplagem
shows
está
the breadth
prevista aí,
and
então, para
caliber of this
acontecer
crew and
às
how prepared they are. This is the first
7h44
all-European crew. They're
da
representing
manhã
5 nations
e
across
pelo
them.
horário de
And
Brasília.
with that, they're helping to expand low Earth orbit. All right, now let's talk a little bit about how they got to this point today. So on January 18th, starting their mission, crew wrapped up their
Estamos aí
pre-flight
em
quarantine phase
transmissão
as they
em
flew.
conjunto
You
com a
can see there
SpaceX, NASA,
from their quarantine facility,
AXIOM e
got on
ISA.
board their helicopter and flew to their launch pad. You can see them coming over the Cape right there and enjoying the trip, I think, looking at their vehicle for the first time.
So fun.
Yeah, I can't imagine what's going
E
through their
ontem
minds right
tivemos
now.
aí
You
a
can see
nossa
a mix of
transmissão
just pure
histórica aqui no
joy
canal,
and
aí com a
real solemnness as they
pouso
get to greet their families and wave
do
goodbye to them
Slim, né,
before
na
suiting
Lua.
up in the LLF,
Então, o
and that's
pouso
really
então
where we head
foi
over to SpaceX.
confirmado
that they
com
were able
sucesso
to
então
fly around the launch
na
pad,
Lua,
uh,
a
before
data de
getting turned over
ontem,
to the
20 de
SpaceX crew,
janeiro
which is what we see here.
de 2024,
We
né? Vocês
put
podem
them in
acompanhar,
the Teslas and we drive them
né,
over to the
a
Falcon
transmissão,
support
né, que
building, which
foi
is where our
realizada
suit up room
ontem,
is.
ou então aí conferir na íntegra, né, como foi então este momento do pouso do Slim na Lua, né? Tem aí na parte dos nossos vídeos, né? Então aí você pode acompanhar por lá. Né, estamos aí vendo os momentos anteriores, então aí da parte então aí do que foi, né, o lançamento que foi realizado no dia 18 de janeiro de 2024, era no Centro Espacial Kennedy, nos Estados Unidos. Né, o lançamento então foi lá realizado com sucesso. Caso às 18h49, né? Então aí do dia 18 de janeiro, então aí o lançamento da Falcon 9 Dragon, né? Então aí realizado com sucesso no dia 18. E agora hoje estamos aí acompanhando a chegada deles à Estação Espacial Internacional. Nós estamos aí vendo momentos de anteontem. Esse foi o primeiro momento aí em órbita após o lançamento. Para quem está chegando agora na nossa transmissão, né? São 6h29. Estamos aí novamente com imagens
Dragon
da Dragon,
spacecraft. This is Dragon Freedom
então,
approaching the
Estação
International
Espacial
Space Station.
Internacional.
This is I love these views
Vocês
because
podem,
right now it
observar, né,
seems
6h30
pretty far away,
agora.
and before you know it, you're gonna look up and we're gonna see Dragon, and it's just gonna be like, oh wait, it's knocking on the door to get to the space station.
You see it coming back into frame there.
Yeah, so this camera is positioned on the International Space Station, and it
Lembrando aí que
is
estamos aí com a
manually
visão então da Estação Espacial
I don't want to say
Internacional.
removed, but it is the controllers at the International Space Station Mission Control in
Estamos
Houston
aguardando então a
are actually
confirmação da
continually
chegada do
adjusting
ponto
the
zero de
angle of this
aproximação
camera
aí
because
com a estação
they're going
na marca
17,500 miles
de
per hour here,
400
and
metros.
Dragon is coming closer, and so they have to keep readjusting the camera to make sure that it stays in view. So that's why it floats out of the frame and then comes back in.
And that tracking readjusts to capture it back in frame
Lembrando
and
que eles vão
allows us to
ficar
keep
então
good visuals
a
on
bordo
the
da
vehicle
Estação
as it approaches.
Espacial
So right now,
Internacional
all
por
4
2
crew members
semanas.
are there inside that capsule. We're looking at the capsule from the top down. So we're actually looking straight into the forward hatch. This is the hatch that will be utilized to dock with the space station. And then there's a great view here. The pointy thing kind of at the top there, or what looks like the top to us, that is the nose cone. So that's why there's a bit of an asymmetrical shape from where we're looking, is because the nose cone actually when after they get on orbit, we open the nose cone to expose the docking mechanism in the forward hatch. So that's why it's a little bit asymmetrical from this particular view. But all 4 crew members are currently strapped into their seats. We're going to be stepping into some leak checks as they recently donned or put on their spacesuits. We're going to perform those leak checks. As Gary said, we have quite a bit of time here before we move into the mid-course maneuver and eventually hit waypoint 0. So, excuse me. But the crew, they put their suits back on, they're in their seats, and we will perform those leak checks just to make sure that all of the zippers are pulled up into where they need to be, to make sure the visors are clicking shut and in the locked position, really just to make sure that the crew put their suits on the right way.
Yeah.
That's important because we do put the suit on whenever we're entering more dynamic phases of flight.
Right, and that process you just mentioned, Kate, right, that's a huge part of their training, their pre-flight training to get them to this point. They know what to expect to run this procedure while they're on orbit, and so that's going to be something that they don those suits, they do some nominal checkouts, and they run that procedure to make sure that they're doing good.
They have trained for that, but of course, trying to get dressed in space
ponto zero de aproximação a 400
be a little
metros
different than
da
training
Estação
here,
Espacial
but you're absolutely
Internacional.
right, and the crew is trained
Neste
to
momento, então, são 6 horas e
assist their other crew
33
members
minutos
in making
pelo
sure
horário
that all those things are
de
in their
Brasília.
places before they hop in back into
É,
their
você está
seats
acompanhando,
and
então,
put
a
their
missão
seatbelts, or really their,
AXIOM-3,
safety harnesses.
né,
They're
com
a
essa
bit more
fase, então,
complex
aí
than a
de
seatbelt, but,
aproximação
yes,
e
so
acoplagem
we know that
na
they
Estação
do go
Espacial
through that training, but it's
Internacional.
always different when in space.
Estamos aí, então, acompanhando a chegada da
Speaking
Dragon.
of training, as you can see here,
Após aí o seu
actually, it looks like
lançamento
it may
sendo
have floated out
realizado
of view again, but
com
it'll come back.
sucesso no dia
As
18
Dragon continues
de
its
janeiro,
approach, let's talk a bit
né,
more
pela
about that preparation that the crew went
SpaceX,
through in order to be ready for
lá no
this mission.
complexo de lançamento
Altogether,
número
the
39A,
AXIOM-3 crew spent
no
about
Centro
35
Espacial
days training
Kennedy, nos
inside
Estados
Dragon,
Unidos.
and crew members individually received additional training specific to their role, learning SpaceX
Lembrando
protocols,
então que a tripulação
International
de
Space
hoje
Station
da
systems,
AXIOM-3,
and preparing for all the
né,
science
ficará
and
então
outreach activities
acoplados
that
na
they'll be
Estação
conducting
Espacial
while in space. So you can see
Internacional
here
aí por
the
2
crew training
semanas.
here at our Hawthorne training centers to prepare for their mission. Our teams here at SpaceX spent the last several months teaching the crew about orbital mechanics, how to live in microgravity, and running simulations of full missions from inside our Dragon
Lembrando
training
que lá eles vão
vehicles,
fazer
like
aí
the one you
cerca
see
de
here. The training
30
program
experimentos
includes
e
nearly 100
demonstrações
different
em
lessons covering all
microgravidade,
aspects of the flight. The team also spent
na
time at
parte
the
aí
launch
de
pad, as well
fisiologia
as in the suit-up room,
humana
and working through
e
emergency
também
procedures that would be
aí
necessary in
junto
the
e
unlikely
também aí
of
na
a pad
parte
abort scenario.
industrial. Aí
Yeah, I mean, that's a
com a
lot of extensive
expedição
training just for the vehicle alone, in
70
addition to some other systems.
na
So, but
Estação
crew also spent
Espacial Internacional.
extensive amounts of time in historic Building 9 at the Johnson Space Center that you can see there, learning from certified instructors on all critical systems necessary to ensure a successful stay aboard the orbiting lab. The team even prepared for unlikely emergencies and learned how to provide first aid in a microgravity environment. Additionally, they learned how to prepare food and make selections for their meals, as well as learned how mission control operates to better ensure
E
mission
ontem, né,
success
também
during
tivemos
that flight.
aí a confirmação, né, de que o Japão então se tornou o 5º país a fazer então pouso na superfície da Lua, né? Então aí com o Slim e seus rovers Leve 1 e Leve 2. E foi uma live aí histórica. Então aí quero agradecer, né, pela grande audiência que tivemos ontem aí nessa transmissão histórica, aí transmitindo então o pouso aí da superfície da Lua. Também tivemos aí a segunda tentativa para o lançamento da missão Starlink na parte da noite, aí lá no Vandenberg, na Califórnia. Porém, né, por problemas aí no tempo, né, na questão climática, aí então foi abortado. Ainda não temos indicação, né, da nova data para o lançamento, né? Deixa eu até verificar aqui enquanto ainda não volta as imagens da Dragon. Vamos verificar aí então se tem nova data então para nova tentativa de lançamento do Starlink do grupo 711. Não, por enquanto ainda não tem data firmada para a nova tentativa de lançamento aí então do Starlink, tá? Ainda não temos data. Mas assim que tivermos data, né, alguma informação, né, aí vamos então estar divulgando aqui no nosso canal, né, e também nas redes sociais. Então fiquem ligados aí então para a nova oportunidade para o lançamento então do Starlink. Lembrando que para a semana que vem teremos aí a missão com a Rocket Lab, né, For of a Kind, né, marcado para o dia 27, e dia 29 teremos aí a missão do Galaxy, da Virgin Galactic, né, da Galaxy 06. E vamos ver aí novas informações aí sobre a Dragon.
Who's over at Johnson Space Center at International Space
Vamos
Station
estar indo aí a
Control. How
Dragon.
are things going over there, Gary?
Hey, thanks, Kate. You tossed at just the right time. We are just in the middle of a mid-course burn right now. So we're standing by as a very short burn. So we're just going to stand by and just monitor the performance. It's just a course correction maneuver just to make sure that we are right on track to meet up with that waypoint 0.
Nesse momento, então, 6 horas e 38
And we're hearing good
minutos.
call-outs. Trajectory has converged onto waypoint 0. Teams are analyzing just to confirm, but we are right on track for hitting that milestone. We have a clock on the board here counting down a little less than 20 minutes, and we're expected to arrive at waypoint 0.
Estamos aí então na guarda da confirmação do ponto 0 de aproximação aí a 400 metros.
Getting beautiful views of the Dragon capsule. Since we last talked from Houston, we're now more than halfway from our original distance. We checked in last at 4 kilometers. We're now just a little bit more than 1 kilometer away. You're seeing the Dragon making its slow and methodical approach to the International Space Station. Space Station right now is
Dragon,
flying
SpaceX on the big
267.
loop. Nominal mid-course maneuver complete, and the trajectory has converged on waypoint 0.
Charlie, thanks.
Estamos aí nos aproximando então no ponto 0 de
From the
aproximação.
SpaceX
Seja
mission
bem-vindo,
control teams
Walter.
over in Hawthorne, crew operations resource engineer, the voice that you're hearing from Hawthorne to the Dragon crew, confirming that good mid-course maneuver. Again, that's just a way to make sure that the trajectory is converged onto the expected waypoint 0. You can see all the burns that have happened over the past couple of days to get us to this moment.
6 horas e 40 minutos pelo horário de Brasília. Estamos aí a menos de 1 hora e 4 minutos.
Just to get us right to where that waypoint 0 is. That 400 meters that you're seeing is directly below the International Space Station. You can see two zones surrounding the International Space Station.
Estamos agora nos dirigindo aí oficialmente aí para o ponto 0 aí de aproximação a 400 metros.
Right in front of the International Space Station, just outside of that keep out sphere, not entering until we get the all clear. Now the waypoint 1 is the next milestone, and it takes us immediately in front of the International Space Station. It still remains outside of the keep out sphere until the teams assess.
Quem ainda não se inscreveu no nosso canal, né, se inscreva. Estamos aí quase chegando aí na marca de 1.110 inscritos.
Now in a short loss of signal with the video from the International Space Station, we can expect intermittent gaps in our video, but the flight control teams have done a good job of securing pretty continuous coverage through the duration of our coverage from
Station Houston on the big loop for Laurel and approach monitoring.
On 2.
Dragon range is approximately 1,000 meters. Monitor long-range approach for steps 1 to 4 in 1.102. Dragon approach and retreat monitoring. ISS crew is now primed for vehicle approach monitoring.
Copy, ISS is prime and we're stepping into the procedure.
Seis horas e 42 minutos.
Voice you heard was from here in Mission Control Houston, the flight control room you see on the right.
Estamos aí aguardando a confirmação então aí da confirmação então da distância de 400 metros da Estação Espacial Internacional. Lembrando aí quem está fazendo a parte então de monitoramento são as astronautas da NASA, Laura O'Hara e Jasmine Mobelli, aí da expedição 70 da Estação Espacial Internacional.
Awaiting the AX-3 crew's arrival to the International Space Station. In the front there, seated.
And attitude is as expected. Dragon is facing us.
Houston copies.
E temos imagens novamente da Dragon.
A tally ho from the crew aboard the International Space Station. Laurel O'Hara confirming she has visuals of the Dragon Freedom as it is now inside 1 kilometer from the International Space Station.
Da Dragon, aí estamos a 1 quilômetro de distância.
Flight control teams tracking a good trajectory. That mid-course maneuver put us right where we need to be. On track to converge with waypoint 0 in almost exactly 15 minutes from now. Again, waypoint 0 being 400 meters directly below the station. Once meeting that point, we can expect very likely to proceed past that waypoint and swing out in front of the station to converge with the docking axis. From there, we'll make a slow and methodical approach inwards to dock with the very forward port of the International Space Station. International Space Station and Dragon Freedom are currently flying 264 statute miles over the South Indian Ocean, just east off the coast of Madagascar.
Então, a 1 hora da acoplagem. Então, a acoplagem esperada então para 7h44 da manhã. Então, falta aí menos de 1 hora.
We can expect to be in an orbital daytime for quite some time here.
Estamos então aí a menos de 1 quilômetro de distância aí da Estação Espacial Internacional, nos aproximando então aí do ponto 0, 400 metros. Aí após esse ponto 0, né, teremos aí mais dois outros pontos, ponto 1 a 220 metros e o ponto 2
But for now, we can see a lot of the features of the International Space Station. Again, those intermittent loss of comms, those are very much expected throughout our coverage today. It's tracking and data relay satellites. These are geosynchronous satellites that communicate with these low Earth orbit spacecraft.
Lembrando que eles vão ficar na Estação Espacial Internacional por 2 semanas.
For at least through the most remainder of our sunlight. Again, sun setting probably around 4:09 a.m. is the predicted sunset.
Estamos vendo imagens da Dragon, lembrando que o monitoramento então Dragon está sendo realizado aí pelas astronautas da NASA, Jasmine Mobile e Laura O'Hara, da Expedição 70.
We're seeing features of the Dragon spacecraft from here. On the very
Estamos
forward end, you
ainda
can see that nose cone pointing straight towards the
a
International
menos
Space
de 1
Station.
quilômetro de distância.
Equipment facing right towards there, and
Nos aproximando então aí no ponto 0 a 400 metros.
C2V2, Common Communications for Visiting Vehicles. Relaying
Bom dia,
communications in
Cícero,
between
seja
the two
bem-vindo aí à
from
nossa
spacecraft.
transmissão.
And of course, relaying
Sim,
them
realmente
down to
aí é
flight control teams you
muito
see
lindo então as
in,
imagens que nós
both
estamos aí
flight control
acompanhando
rooms.
da nave Dragon Freedom.
Getting even closer now, we're seeing the flashing docking light that's in the very center of there. You can start seeing the features of the soft capture ring, the gray center that's around the middle there. That'll be the soft capture ring. As we start getting even closer to the International Space Station, that soft capture ring will extend and prepare for a nice cushy contact with the International Space
E lembrando
Station.
que ontem tivemos a nossa transmissão aí do pouso do Slim, né, na Rua. Aí temos imagens internas aí da Dragon. Aí temos agora imagens da Dragon, vendo então a Estação Espacial Internacional.
We got just a glimpse of the crew inside and are now seeing what the International Space Station looks like from Dragon Freedom.
Aí então aí do lado direito aí então temos imagens agora partidas, né? Aí do lado direito a imagem da Dragon vendo a estação e do lado esquerdo a estação vendo a Dragon.
Ground has pulled go for approach 0 and we will be enabling the maneuver shortly. Expect to reach waypoint 0 at 09:58 and a reminder that Dragon will continue approach through waypoint 1 towards waypoint 2 without stopping.
SpaceX Freedom, we copy all.
Estamos aí
Excellent
aguardando.
news from the flight control teams. Teams have pulled go to past several of the upcoming waypoints. We are talking about waypoint 0 being 400 meters right below the International Space Station. You can hear flight control teams pulled go to pass not only waypoint 0, which is 400 meters below, but waypoint 1, which is 220 meters in front of the docking axis, in front of the International Space
Então, nesse
Station.
momento aí já deu autorização para seguir direto até o ponto 1 de aproximação aí a 220 metros da estação. Então, nesse momento estamos aí no ponto 0 de aproximação, né, mas já deu aí já a continuidade aí de seguir aí adiante até o ponto 1 de aproximação aí a 220 metros da estação.
There is another scenario where the Dragon will simply pause for just a few seconds to switch modes to approach from waypoint 2. So it'll just pause for maybe about 30 seconds before proceeding in. But again, flight control teams will assess Dragon's approach and performance along the way, and does have the ability to command a hold at 20 meters just to wait and make sure
Então, do
conditions
lado
and
direito,
systems are
então,
good before
a imagem
proceeding in for that docking.
da Dragon
So far, so
vendo a
good, though. We're
estação
tracking
e
a
do lado
trajectory that
esquerdo
takes us in for
aí
that expected docking
a
time of
estação vendo
4:40
a Dragon.
a.m. Central Time, a little less than an hour from now.
Estamos então agora nesse momento já em direção ao ponto 1 de aproximação.
Dragon continuing to fly over the Indian Ocean, still seeing those features. You can see the nose cone deployed. This is a feature of Dragon that's deployed very quickly after spacecraft separation from the Falcon 9 rocket. You can sort of see it
Né, apesar
swirling
aí
out.
do
When it does so, it exposes the docking ring and the docking lights, which you see flashing. But one of the primary reasons it needs to unfold are those 4 forward bulkhead Dracos. Those Draco thrusters
Opa, muito
provide
obrigado
much
aí,
of the force
Observatório
needed in those
Astronômico aí
initial phasing burns that we discussed a little earlier. Those
da
5
Catarina.
major burns that
Obrigado
bring
aí pela sua
Dragon
inscrição, né,
incrementally
de Santa
closer
do Rio
to
Claro,
the
aí em São
International
Paulo.
Space Station.
Né,
Forward
muito obrigado
bulkhead
aí pela
Dracos have done
inscrição
their
aqui no canal, né?
job
Muito
for
feliz
the
aí
approach and rendezvous. We'll see him
por
again
ter nos
when
encontrado.
Dragon leaves the International Space Station and the forward
Né, então
bulkhead
aí para quem
Dracos are
tá
used for a very significant maneuver, the
aí chegando então
orbit
na
burn.
transmissão
But
agora,
for now,
nesta
we'll use
manhã,
the
então
service
aí
section
6 horas e
Dracos
50
for
minutos
the
pela
upcoming maneuvers,
horário
including
de
the
Brasília.
approach 0, which is the
Né?
maneuver
Estamos
right
aí
at the
então
waypoint
fazendo
0
a nossa
mark,
parte então
400
de
meters below the
aproximação,
station, and approach
iniciando,
1
né, o procedimento de
that takes us
aproximação
right in
final
front of
com a
the docking
Estação
axis
Espacial
inwards to make
Internacional,
contact
aí
with the
com a
International
Dragon
Space Station.
Freedom,
Flight control
com a
teams
missão
working in tandem
AXIOM-3,
together. You're
né,
seeing
que
the
teve
teams over in
início
Hawthorne
aí na
monitoring
sua
Dragon's
missão no
performance,
dia
working with the crew
18
inside.
de janeiro de 2024, né? E hoje então aí ela está fazendo a sua
Great views of
fase
the
aí de
International Space
aproximação aí com a
Station, only
Estação
500 meters away at
Espacial
this point, and you can start seeing
Internacional,
features that make it
onde eles
seem
vão ficar
as though
aí
the Dragon
acoplados
is right underneath. We're almost there,
por
about
2
7 minutes
semanas.
away from waypoint 0. This is about what 500 meters looks like.
Então temos aí imagens
Right now we're over the North
novamente então
Indian Ocean. We're about to cross
da
the
Estação
southern border
Espacial
of India here soon.
Internacional, nesse momento aí
Still in
próximos
orbital
à
daylight,
costa
expecting that
da
sunset
Índia.
in a little less than 20 minutes. The crew inside Dragon monitoring
Mais
the
uma vez
performance.
aí
You can see in the
imagens
middle screen
internas da
there,
Dragon.
that point at the very bottom. That's the Dragon spacecraft, and they're trying to meet with that point right below the space station. And you can see what the maneuver is about to do. It's about to swing it right at that point, right in front of the docking axis. The cone you see in the circle
Imagens
in the
então aí
middle
da
of that screen.
Dragon dentro da Estação Espacial Internacional.
Features of the International Space Station becoming a bit more prominent. The solar arrays on both wings of the space station, to the left and to the right. The
Lembrando
forward
que aqui
port,
também no canal
where
a gente
Dragon Freedom and
transmite
the AXIOM crew will
também
be
as
docking,
caminhadas
is at the very tip
espaciais,
of
né? Então
this
tanto
view
pelo
here.
lado
That is the
americano
node
quanto pelo lado
forward port,
russo,
international
né?
docking
Na Estação
adapter.
Espacial Internacional. E vocês
Dragon
veem
again will
também
swing from this view from the
através aí
bottom,
dos
right down
nossos
in
vídeos
front
aí
to
do
meet with the
short, né?
docking axis.
Principalmente as transmissões que ocorrem aí ao redor do mundo, né? Dos lançamentos que ocorrem
Commander Michael
ao redor do
López-Alegría
mundo,
on the left of
né? No
your
que,
screen.
no caso,
One
a
of
gente
the
não
4
consegue
crew
aí
members
a
inside
transmissão,
Dragon
né?
Freedom, suited up, ready to monitor these
Porque tem algumas
operations.
missões,
Pilots
né? Como
Walter
vocês sabem, da
Villadei
China
to the right.
e da Rússia, né? Que não são
Alper
às vezes não são
Gezeravcı
transmitidas, né?
is
Aí
also
para
a mission
nós,
specialist, as well as Marcus
né? Mas
Barnes.
aí a
4 crew members make up the
gente traz as
AXIOM-3,
imagens
AXIOM Mission
para
3 crew,
vocês.
headed to the International Space Station for a 14-day stay.
Caso eu, né? Porque é o canal aí de uma missão, né? Eu faço aí a coisa toda funcionar. Lembrando que aí, para quem ainda não me conhece, né? Meu nome então é William Pessoa. Eu sou professor de matemática.
Counting down 5 minutes to
E temos
waypoint
aí
0.
no nosso canal conteúdos então de matemática.
3:58 is the approximate time of executing that approach maneuver. Again, it's the service section Dracos
E
on the
também
outside
conteúdos aí
of
de Python,
the
né? Aí na
Dragon
parte de
spacecraft
programação
that will take
em
it,
Python.
that will be fired and make sure that the Dragon converges to waypoint 1, again, right in front of the International Space Station.
E apesar do display aí da Dragon ser bonita, né? Mas eu prefiro mais quando tem a nave da Soyuz, né? Quando aí ela nos dá todo aí o parâmetro, né, de telemetria na tela. Mas também a gente consegue ali enxergar, né, o parâmetro ali de telemetria de dentro da nave Dragon. Né, estamos aí pouco a pouco então fazendo a parte então de aproximação aí com a Estação Espacial Internacional.
3.5 minutes to approach 0. That's the waypoint marker. We're getting views, continuing to get views from the ground stations, providing
6 horas e 55 minutos pelo horário de Brasília.
And of course, continuing to get great views from the International Space Station. We're now flying over India, right there. You're seeing the southern coast.
Estamos aí agora sobre a Índia.
And International Space Station flying.
We see range less than 400 meters and attitude as expected.
Então, nesse momento aí, confirmando, estamos aí a 400 metros de distância. Então, aí temos a confirmação, de fato, aí que estamos a 400 metros de distância. Então, aí no ponto 0 de aproximação.
NASA astronaut Laurel O'Hara confirming the data that she's seeing, again, from inside the International Space Station. She and Jasmine Mogbelli, another NASA astronaut, monitoring Dragon's approach to the International Space Station, confirming the data that they're seeing on their screen.
Então aí confirmando, então, mais uma vez, que estamos aí, então, nesse momento de fato, aí no ponto 0 de aproximação a 400 metros de distância. Né? E com isso já superamos a marca de 1.110 inscrições aqui no canal. Né? Quero agradecer aí a todos aí pelas inscrições. Pela audiência também aqui na nossa transmissão. Seis horas e 57 minutos pelo horário de Brasília. Então, agora há pouco, as astronautas da NASA, Jasmine Mogbelli e Laura O'Hara, né, que estão aí fazendo a parte de monitoramento da Dragon, né, confirmou, né, aí estamos a 400 metros de distância. Estamos aí então no ponto 0 de aproximação.
Both vehicles flying at 17,500 miles per hour.
Lembrando então que no domingo, então, aí vamos ter lá na Twitch, né, nosso programa Resumo das Missões, horário ainda a definir, né, para vermos o que aconteceu então durante esta semana aí que foi lotada, né, de atrações aqui no canal.
And confirmed, we're in approach 0 now.
Então, nesse momento aí confirmado o ponto 0 aí de aproximação 400 metros. Seis horas e 59 minutos pelo horário de Brasília. Nesse momento estamos oficialmente a 400 metros de distância.
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Loop. Approach 0 has started and the trajectory has converged on waypoint 1. You can expect arrival at waypoint 1 at 1025 UTC.
SpaceX Freedom, we copy.
E agora, nesse momento, né, já deu autorização para iniciarmos aí a parte de aproximação para o ponto
And with
1.
that, the teams have confirmed a good approach 0. That was a good burn, and we're converged onto the next waypoint, waypoint 1, being 220 meters right in front of the
Lembrando que o
International
ponto
Space
1
Station.
de aproximação
Read from
agora
crew
será a
operations resource
220
engineer to the crew aboard Dragon
metros
Freedom
de
confirms that we're looking
distância.
at 4:25 a.m. Central Time.
7 horas pelo horário de Brasília.
Waypoint 1. Again, the
Faltando
teams
então
have
aí
pulled
44
a go,
minutos
no-go for
para a
passing
acoplagem.
those two waypoints, waypoint 0 and waypoint 1. So we'll see a maneuver very similar to what we've seen for waypoint 0, where once we reach that waypoint, the approach maneuver will be immediately executed. No hold is expected. However, teams will continue to monitor their performance. Everything's looking good so far. With that, we're just about 25 minutes away
Aí,
from that
belíssimas
waypoint 0.
imagens,
So
né,
why don't
que
we
estamos
toss it
vendo
back
aí
over
da
to Hawthorne
Estação
and check in with the
Espacial
teams over there, Kate and
Internacional.
John.
Thanks,
Já
Gary.
tivemos aí
For those of you
perda,
that have just
voltamos.
recently joined, we are tracking the approach and docking of
Belíssimas
Dragon,
imagens
the
aí da
AX-3
Estação
mission
Espacial
approaching the International Space Station.
Internacional,
We
aí
do
com imagens
expect
da
contact to occur
Terra
around 2:40 a.m.
e
Pacific.
da Dragon.
So coming up in about 40 minutes from now. Everything is going really well so far. We are now just past the 400-meter mark, or waypoint 0, heading toward the 220-meter mark, waypoint 1. And as Gary reported earlier, the teams polled yes to not have to stop at either of those waypoints. Those are opportunities for us, if needed, where we can stop there and reset and do whatever course corrections are necessary. But good news, we're able to cruise right through waypoint 0, which is what just happened. We're going to be able to go straight through
Lembrando que
waypoint
estamos aí
1,
agora
which,
pouco
as
a
I
pouco,
mentioned,
né,
is
nos
about
aproximando aí
220
na
meters
fase
away.
final de
So
aproximação.
it's safe to say,
Então aí com a Estação
AX-3, they're
Espacial
cruising this
Internacional,
morning, which
já
is
estamos
great.
no
I'm
ponto
sure
0
that they
de
are so
aproximação
excited. This journey has been about
e vamos agora
36
nos
hours or
dirigir
so
para o ponto
since
1,
they lifted off.
que é a
Gosh, I guess that
220
was
metros. E
not
depois teremos
yesterday,
o
but the day
ponto 2
before.
a
They
20
lifted
metros
off at
e o
4:49
contato.
p.m. Eastern
Aí
Time.
terminando aí
And so
a
yeah, about
parte
36
de
hours they've been in
aproximação
Dragon,
e
and I'm
acoplagem.
sure that they are very much looking forward to beginning all the science and experiments and everything that they are about to embark on for about the next 2 weeks or so.
You're absolutely right, Kate. I mean,
Então, lembrando que eles vão ficar na Estação Espacial Internacional aí por 2 semanas.
Core that is to this mission, these particular objectives, and you really can't talk about
Então, fazendo aí cerca de 30 experimentos, né, científicos aí na base de fisiologia humana e na parte industrial aí também. Juntamente então com a Expedição 70 aí da Estação Espacial Internacional. Lembrando que para fevereiro ou março, né, aguardando a confirmação da data, teremos aí a nova tripulação aí da SpaceX, a Crew 8, hein? Então, Crew 8, já confirmando aí para aí final de fevereiro, início de março, aí a sua ida para a Estação Espacial Internacional. Lembrando aí, temos aí 5 países participantes hoje desta missão privada aí da AXIOM-3 com a Spacex, formação aí europeia, aí da Espanha, Estados Unidos, Itália, Suécia e Turquia. No caso daí da Espanha e Estados Unidos, o Marcos é o Michael López-Alegría, né, que é o nosso
is
comandante.
personalized to the crew. It's not just about designing something that looks cool, right? Of course, everybody wants cool mission patches, but I just really appreciate when there's so much
Villadei,
thought
né,
put
que é o
behind the design.
italiano, ele já participou de missão anterior da Virgin Galactic, né? Então, o Villadei, né, participou aí da missão anterior aí da Virgin Galactic.
Cohesiveness reflected among them, and in line with cohesiveness, there
Inclusive
are
tem
many
vídeo,
teams
né, dos
supporting
melhores
that
momentos aí
four-person crew.
desta missão que ele
We can
participou aí
see
da
here on our screen,
Virgin
they are
Galactic.
getting closer and closer to the International Space Station, like we mentioned before. They passed waypoint 0, which is 400 meters away, so they are getting closer. But the teams all around the
40
globe that are
minutos então para a
supporting
acoplagem
this mission, there are
na Estação Estação Espacial Internacional.
In each of those places. So here at SpaceX Mission Control, or MCCX, that's the view that you see there on your
Estamos aí
screen.
no
This is
centro
the
de
control center we
controle da
have here
SpaceX,
at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne,
aí na
California.
Califórnia.
We have a position called CORE, which is the Crew Operations Resource Engineer. That is the voice of communication to the, actually there you see there, this is our core for today. That is Celie Grossman, and she is the primary voice in communicating, really the only voice in communicating from SpaceX ground to the crew. And this position is held all through all these dynamic phases of flight.
Aproximação e acoplagem então da Dragon Freedom na Estação Espacial Internacional pela missão AXIOM-3 AX3.
Also over at Houston Space Center, we have the flight director that sits next to Capcom. Actually, here a live view of our flight control center. Excuse me, of the Flight Control Center at Mission Control Houston. This is where Gary is reporting from whenever we go back to him. But the flight director is there next to Capcom, and that person leads the team through.
Copy, Laurel. We'd like for you to kill it and restart it.
And work.
As I was mentioning, next to Capcom is the flight director. That's the individual that leads the team through major milestones. There's also ADCO, that stands for Attitude, Determination, and Control Officer. They handle controls, attitude, orientation of the ISS. There's also VVO, the Visiting Vehicle Officer.
How can we restart it?
Checking. Laurel, we're going to take that one for the ground. So stand by.
So I believe that was Capcom. As I mentioned before, that is the primary voice from Johnson Space Center here, Houston Mission Control to station. And then, of course, there's the flight surgeon, keep continuing to talk about these key roles. Flight surgeon, it's basically, the person that the crew regularly speaks to for scheduled chances of medical conferences. So this is a standard part of spaceflight where we're checking in on the crew and making sure that they're feeling well, and if they're not, assisting them to make them feel better.
Yeah, exactly right, Kate. And
então, lembrando que ontem, né, tivemos aí o pouso confirmado aí do Slim na superfície da Lua, né? Então, o Japão aí se tornando o 5º país a pousar na Lua, né? Apesar então do Slim, né, tá aí com pouca bateria, né, de energia, né, mas os rovers Leve 1 e 2, né, estão aí funcionando bem. Também ontem tivemos a segunda tentativa, né, para o lançamento da missão Starlink número 135 do grupo 711 em Vandenberg, na Califórnia, né, porém aí devido à questão aí climática, né, aí não tivemos lançamento, né, tivemos aí um aborto automático faltando 1 minuto, então aí para o lançamento. Nós estamos aí com uma leve perda de comunicação em vídeo, aí com a Estação Espacial Internacional, né, que é normal, né, ao longo da trajetória pela viagem então à órbita da Terra. Estamos aí agora no centro de controle da AXIOM. Nós estamos aí aguardando então as imagens retornar aí da Estação Espacial Internacional. Agora novamente aí na Califórnia, as imagens aí da Dragon. Imagens aí da SpaceX, desculpe. Sim, falta bem pouco, né? Pelo horário esperado, né? Falta aí menos de 34 minutos. Aí então para a acoplagem. Estamos aguardando então a autorização de fato aí para a fase então de aproximação para o ponto 1, né? A distância então de 220 metros da Estação Espacial Internacional.
Net we're talking on. So a little bit of clarification there on why you don't just hear the Quindar tone and then someone saying, hey, we have,
Então, nesse momento aí, pelo horário de Brasília, são 7 horas e 11 minutos.
Supporting missions like this, it's really important for everybody to kind of know what role they play when. And I think that's one of the things that I absolutely love about these kind of dynamic operations, right? It's, as we mentioned, if you move slow, you move smooth, and if you move smooth, you move fast. And having procedures to help you do that in a training.
Está assistindo então ao canal Will PTV, né? Estamos aqui então acompanhando a parte então de aproximação e a chegada da tripulação da AXIOM-3 na Estação Espacial Internacional. Últimas informações que nós temos aí, que já estão no ponto 0 aí de aproximação a 400 metros de distância horizontal então da Estação Espacial Internacional, aguardando o procedimento então para seguir adiante, né, para o ponto 1 de aproximação a 220 metros de distância e depois ao ponto 2 a 20 metros de distância e logo depois o contato então aí com a Estação Espacial Internacional. Nesse momento estamos aí com perda de contato esperado, né, aí com a estação e a Dragon, né, estamos aí aguardando o retorno das imagens.
So that's good news. But those spacesuits are really important. You know, we heard us mention before that we have the crew wear them during the more dynamic phases of flight, and that's because those suits protect the crew from depressurization events. The suit inflates with nitrox, which is a nitrogen oxygen mixture, and they are flame resistant. So cool visual here, kind of illustrating it. They are custom to each astronaut. It's a single piece suit. The helmets.
Desculpa, né? Então, eles estão aí mostrando aí o traje, né, da SpaceX, né, que normalmente o pessoal quando não é da AXIOM, né, eles usam, e da trajes aí da SpaceX. Lembrando que o lançamento desta missão, né, da AXIOM-3 ocorreu no dia 18 de janeiro, às 18 horas e 49 minutos, pelo horário de Brasília, lá no Centro Espacial Kennedy, na plataforma Centro de Complexo de Lançamento 39A. E o nosso próximo lançamento, né, por enquanto, temos só marcado até o momento, né, a missão, a Rocket Lab, né, o primeiro voo do Electron, aí em 2024, né, será realizado no dia 27 de janeiro.
Dragon while the crew is living on the International Space Station. The suits
era para ter sido realizado no dia 18, mas foi adiado então para dia
aka space blocks,
27.
there are designated suits for those EVAs, known as EVA suits.
E também
The
estamos
amount of
aguardando
time
então
that
nova
they spend in
oportunidade de
suits
data aí
varies.
para
As we
a
mentioned
missão
before,
Starlink,
they
aí
wear
do
them during
grupo
launch, but then
711.
whenever we did the on-orbit event
Que
with the
teve aí
crew
o
the
aborto
day before yesterday,
na noite de ontem.
an hour and a half after they lifted off, we had an opportunity to
7
chat with
horas e
them, and they
15
had already taken
minutos
their
pelo
suits
horário de
off and
Brasília, nesta
were in
manhã
their
de
comfort
sábado,
garments. So,
20 de janeiro
ultimately,
de 2024.
they have to take everything
Estamos
they
aí
need with them in
acompanhando a
order to be
fase
fully
de
self-contained in the
aproximação, aí
Dragon.
já na parte
And yeah, ultimately
praticamente
speaking,
final
the
aí de
suits
aproximação aí
are
com
not only do they look
a
cool,
Estação
they are super
Espacial
functional, and
Internacional,
most importantly, they are safe.
né? A última
So yeah,
informação que nós
it's
tivemos
nice
aí
to
que
see.
estavam no ponto
We don't have the view at the
zero de
moment. As we mentioned,
aproximação,
we're going to lose
400
the views here and there. So
metros
when we
de
have the view,
distância, mas estamos aí com a,
we'll be sure to
até o
bring it
momento aí
back.
com a perda de
The view
comunicação
of
esperado,
hopefully all
né, com
four
a
of them
estação.
seated in their seats,
Né, estamos
and we'll be able to
aguardando
see
então
those
o
suits
sinal
in
retornar.
action.
Já sabemos em
So
qual
with that being
ponto
said,
aí de
let's actually
distância
check back in
estamos
with Gary
agora.
over in Houston
É como vocês
for the
podem
latest
observar
progress
ali ao
with the
fundo,
approach
né,
to the International Space Station.
nas telas então aí da
Hey,
Estação
thank you, Kate.
Espacial
Thank you, John. Yeah,
Johnson
we're monitoring
em Houston.
inside 10 minutes from reaching that
Né, estamos aí
waypoint
então
1.
sem
Now, the
imagens por
teams
enquanto.
in Hawthorne and in Houston are currently talking through some options. We talked about passing that waypoint 1. That's still part of the plan, but right now we're under active discussions to potentially hold outside of the keep-out sphere. Now, that waypoint 1 is 220 meters in front of the docking access. About 180 meters is right at the cusp of that keep-out sphere. The teams may elect to command a hold right around that area just to assess that everything's in tip-top shape before they proceed. So again, we're tracking inside 10 minutes, about 9 minutes from reaching that waypoint 1. The plan is to execute the approach 1 maneuver. That's just firing the Draco thrusters to proceed into the docking axis, but instead of crossing into the keep-out sphere, we'll go ahead and command a hold at about 180
Nós estamos aí
meters.
aguardando
So we're still following along,
as
still
imagens
gathering
então
data, teams
voltarem
are still
aí
discussing, but
da
we
Estação
are good to
Espacial
proceed
Internacional
past
para vermos aí
waypoint 1, and we'll continue
em
to
qual
discuss.
distância já estamos. Então aí estamos já então nos dirigindo para o ponto 1.
What you're looking at now are the
Então
teams
aí de
inside
aproximação
Mission Control
a
Houston, the International
220
Space Station
metros
Flight
de
Control
distância.
teams. Of course, teams
Então
on
aí
both
vocês
on
acompanharam aí
different
na tela
areas
agora.
of the United States here in Houston, and of course in Hawthorne, California, the teams here monitoring the International Space Station. Every position you see here staffed is monitoring a different component and contributing information and data and monitoring, making sure everything's good to the flight director. Flight Director Judd Friedling is leading the teams today in coordination with the mission director in Hawthorne, California, a joint operation indeed. The two flight control centers are working in tandem with the two spacecraft in flight in low Earth orbit. That's the International Space Station being controlled out of this room you see here in Houston, as well as the Dragon controlled from Hawthorne.
Então, ainda não temos nova data aí para a missão Starlink, tá? Do grupo 711. Ainda não temos nova data. Tivemos a oportunidade de lançamento ontem, né? No dia 19. Mas tivemos aí um aborto automático, né, para o lançamento, mas aí não tivemos ainda confirmação de nova data para o lançamento, né, mas vocês podem estar seguindo o canal também nas redes sociais, principalmente lá no X, né, onde lá então vocês acompanham as informações mais rápidas, né, em tempo real aí do que acontece. Estamos de volta aí com o sinal da Dragon. Estamos de volta com o sinal da Freedom.
And copy, Dragon. And for your awareness, we are going to proceed past waypoint 1, and then the ground will be commanding a hold at 180 meters in order to work some ISS solar array configuration.
We will hold at 180 meters and be advised that in your last transmission we picked
Então
up
é isso que eu tô tentando ver aí qual ponto aí que a estação espacial nesse momento Ela está sobrevoando. A última informação que ela estava sobrevoando a
Copy,
Índia, né?
Dragon. Understand you're reporting an echo, and that's correct. The ground will be commanding a hold post waypoint 1.
Antes de cair o sinal.
For what it's worth, the echo just disappeared in that transmission.
We're getting views from inside the Dragon cabin. It was Michael López-Alegría, the voice from inside Dragon Freedom, commander of the AXIOM crew. He's confirming what we did report and the flight teams did discuss, proceeding past waypoint 1 and commanding a hold.
Então, nesse momento, estamos no ponto 1 de
Teams working in
aproximação
tandem,
aí
just to make sure
da
everything's in
Estação
tip-top shape
Espacial
before
Internacional.
continuing to press on. Again, we're in an orbital nighttime right now over the North Pacific Ocean.
Estamos aí sobre o Pacífico Norte.
Expecting expect a sunrise here at about 4:45 a.m.
Então, nesse momento aí estamos sobrevoando o
Central Time.
Pacífico Norte.
Once the teams hold, we'll continue to keep in touch with the flight control teams and share the latest on docking times and status of the crew. For now, we do have waypoint 1 and the trajectory converging on that mile marker just inside
7 horas e 21 minutos pelo horário de Brasília.
Just as a recap, the
Faltando
plan
então
is to proceed
23
past
minutos
waypoint 1 as has
para a
the teams have
acoplagem.
agreed on. That's an approach 1 maneuver, just
A
firing the
acoplagem
Draco
esperada
service,
aí
the service section Draco thrusters
no horário
to
então
push
de
inwards
7
on
horas e
right
44
alongside the docking
minutos.
axis. This is directly in front of the docking port. But there is sort of an imaginary line
Muito
around
obrigado aí,
there called
Vanessa, aí
the
pela
keep-out
sua
sphere,
inscrição.
which is about at the 180
Agradeço aí
meter mark.
a sua
Plan right now
companhia
is
e
to
a
proceed
sua
past waypoint 1 at
audiência
220
aqui
meters,
no
proceed
canal.
inwards to about 180 meters and command a hold. From inside the Dragon cabin, you can see sort of the trajectory when you look at these trajectories and this, from the displays.
Lembrando que além então das
inside
transmissões
Dragon,
ao vivo,
what
né,
is
nós
being
também
calculated
temos
in real time are different breakout
os
maneuvers.
lançamentos, né, que ocorrem
But right
também
now the plan
ao
is
redor do mundo, né, que
to
vocês podem
proceed
acompanhar aí através
past
dos
waypoint
shorts,
1 and go ahead and command that hold.
né, no caso aí das transmissões dos lançamentos
You can
chineses,
sort of
né, e
see,
russos que às
though it
vezes
is in a slightly
não
lower
são
resolution, you
transmitidos
can
aí
sort
para
of see
nós,
the
né?
docking
E aí você
light
aqui
on the
tem
forward end
todos
of
os
Dragon.
vídeos, né, dos
It
lançamentos
has this
ocorridos
pulsing
aí
phenomenon,
ao longo
and
do ano
as
e
it
também
pulses, is
transmitimos aqui ao
illuminating
vivo
the International
as
Space
caminhadas
Station. What you're
espaciais,
seeing
né, tanto pelo
is
lado
the
russo
forward end of the
quanto
space
pelo lado
station. So the docking port
americano
is
na
coming into view
íntegra,
as we're
né, sem
almost 3
intervalo,
minutes from
né,
that
para
docking
vocês.
axis. It's the forward port, but the docking light
Né,
itself
inclusive
is
tem os vídeos aí
illuminating
em
the
destaque
outside
anteriores,
of the
né,
station
das
as we
5
continue over
caminhadas
in
que
an
nós
orbital
fizemos
nighttime
ao
over
longo
the
do ano
Pacific Ocean.
passado, 2023. Né, também aí, além disso, também nós temos conteúdo de matemática e programação em Python, né, já que eu sou aí também professor de matemática. E também, né, para quem é curioso também, né, porque resolvi fazer as transmissões, né, porque também eu cheguei a fazer o curso aí de astronomia, né, na faculdade de astronomia, mas mudei para matemática. É por isso que eu tenho esse fascínio aí, né, para transmissão então aí dos lançamentos, né, e também das missões.
Now we're listening into the flight control teams. Wanted to report some rationale. Again, we're proceeding past waypoint 1, about 2 minutes from now. This 10 minutes allows the Spartan console here in Mission Control Houston. Spartan is responsible for power and thermal
Então aqui como eu,
monitoring of the space
por
station
enquanto
systems,
trabalho com
looking at
apenas
some temperature
monitor,
fluctuations,
né?
some
Então
solar
aí fica
arrays,
meio
just wanting
difícil
those to dampen out just
aí
a tad.
conseguir as
So
informações
we
em
can
tempo
expect
real, né?
a hold.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, noting approach 1 and soft capture ring extension will begin shortly, and then ground will command the hold ahead of 150 meters. And a reminder that manual impulsive retreat recovery is not permitted.
Então, nesse momento aí, estamos em pequeno tempo de hold aí para iniciarmos então o procedimento aí para o ponto 2 a 20 metros de distância.
Again, we're proceeding past waypoint 1 and holding just outside 180 meters. Right now, the plan is the Spartan is monitoring some temperature fluctuations on the ISS solar arrays.
Estamos aí então aguardando então ao ponto para a chegada então do ponto 2 de aproximação. Lembrando aí que o ponto 2 então de aproximação é na marca de 20 metros de distância então da estação espacial. Lembrando que estamos aí com a nave Dragon Freedom aí pela missão AXIOM-3. Estamos aí acompanhando a chegada na Estação Espacial Internacional. Então a nossa transmissão de hoje só vai até a acoplagem, né, da Dragon na Estação Espacial Internacional. Lembrando que eles vão ficar então aí 2 semanas a bordo então da Estação Espacial Internacional, juntamente com a tripulação da Expedição 70, né, formada então aí pelos Estados Unidos, Rússia, Japão e Dinamarca.
And we pass through waypoint 1. Holding for confirmation of that approach 1 performance. 214 meters in closing.
Estamos aí, então nos aproximando aí, então do ponto 1. Confirmando então a aproximação no ponto 1.
Houston Station, we see vehicle mode approach to align point moving to step 3.
Houston copies.
Estamos aguardando, então, qual ponto então de distância ele está nos aproximando. Opa, seja bem-vindo aí, senhor Pitt, da Fortaleza aí, Ceará.
So we will be proceeding with approach 1 and no hold.
Copies, no hold.
And right on time, the teams, instead of commanding that hold at about 180 meters, right at about the 185 meter mark, the lane that we are continuing on forward.
Dragon in the corridor, attitude as expected.
Houston copies.
From inside the International Space Station, Laurel O'Hara monitoring Dragon's
Lembrando que está fazendo então o monitoramento aí da
Proximity Operations Panel.
Então, nesse momento estamos no ponto 1, né? Estamos, quer dizer, passamos um pouquinho aí do ponto 1 de aproximação a 180 metros de distância, então, com a Estação Espacial Internacional, como vocês podem ver aí, então, no diagrama, né? Aí da fase, então, de aproximação final com a estação, né? Que são pequenas aí esferas, né? Então, na fase final de aproximação, né? Temos aí a primeira, que foi a 400 metros, estamos agora a menos de 200, pouco menos de 220 metros, aí então passamos, né, de 220 metros de distância, e estamos indo agora para o ponto 2 a 20 metros de distância. Lembrando que a acoplagem na estação está prevista então aí para acontecer às 7 horas e 44 minutos. Então nesse momento estamos aí sobre o Oceano Pacífico.
Thank you very much, Gary. You know, that was a great example of how you
Na
can
última
hear things
informação aí que
change
nós tivemos aí que ele
dynamically
estava
in flight,
aí
and with
sobrevoando
proper training, flight
a
controllers know how
parte
to
norte, né, do
assess their
Oceano
systems
Pacífico.
and their configurations and make a call on it and move forward.
Absolutely.
I
They're
love
the
seeing that.
experts.
Exactly, exactly. You know, and crew also has been training quite a bit, and in addition to their training for systems like that, they're also training for their research. So this crew in particular is going to be participating in over 30 different scientific efforts over the course of their 2 weeks on the orbiting laboratory. So let's go ahead and highlight 3 from each of the countries who are flying today. First up is the Italian research portfolio. The ISOC system, developed by the Italian Air Force, provides an updated space object catalog and state-of-the-art algorithms for space
Station
events.
Houston on the big loop, can you confirm you are ready for docking?
Sensation, we are ready for docking.
Então estão confirmando aí para ver se estão
With
prontos
that,
aí
at
para
3.2, Dragon will briefly
a
pause,
acoplagem.
align for docking, then automatically resume approach.
Copy.
Faltando então aí 14 minutos
We had heard some good news
Para-
there. We got we heard that the
para
teams will
acoplagem.
go for docking. So excellent news for the AX3
Então aí
crew.
deu o procedimento então
exactly.
para a continuação, então
All right,
para
and with
a
that, the
acoplagem,
ISOC command and control
né, então a
software
confirmação aí,
utilize
estamos aí
the
prontos
Italian and
para
the
a
Italian Air Force
acoplagem.
SSA, or Space Situational Awareness Center, as a European hub for assessing re-entry and fragmentation of space objects. The ISOC Services for ISS project is a proof of concept experiment aimed at demonstrating how, in future space missions such as cislunar or Martian,
Né, então aí
astronauts could be
como
able to
eu
obtain
mencionei, né,
near
então
real-time
como eu estou
conjunction
trabalhando
analysis
apenas
with
por
limited
enquanto, né,
support from Earth
com
ground segments
um
or even
monitor, né,
autonomously.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, soft capture ring extension is complete.
então, nesse momento aí foi dada a configuração aí para a
Good news there.
acoplagem,
That soft capture mechanism is what will make
aí para a
initial
captura
contact with
do
the space station when
mecanismo,
Dragon
né,
is
para o mecanismo de
close enough
captura.
to touch the station.
Então nesse momento foi dada então a sequência aí para a acoplagem.
And the Turkish Space Agency also has a broad range of scientific efforts for this mission.
Então como eu
starting
estava
with Uzma.
falando, né, aí
Algae have many
no
properties
momento,
that
né,
make them ideal
eu estou aí
organisms to
trabalhando
support humans
com
during long-duration
um
spaceflight
monitor, né,
missions.
aí fica
Not
meio
only could they serve
complicado
as nutritional source,
por
included
enquanto
in
de
astronaut menus,
pegar as
algae could
informações
also
aí
remove
durante a
carbon
transmissão.
dioxide and produce oxygen for
Mas
spacecraft
futuramente, né, com a
environmental
gente,
control systems,
aí como
help regulate
com a
spacecraft
ajuda de
temperatures,
vocês, né, aí
recycle certain
a
wastes,
gente
and
vai
even act
melhorando
as a
aos
source of
poucos,
fuel.
inclusive,
The data generated from this experiment will be used to advance the development of
inclusive eu estou
microalgal
na
life support systems
na
for
vaquinha aí, né,
space missions and could
para
impact the
adquirir
design
então
of
um novo
future
PC
carbon
quase
dioxide
da NASA,
capture, oxygen
para
conversion,
poder então aí
wastewater
fazer
treatment
também
systems, and
transmissões em
provide
múltiplas
fertilizer options for other
plataformas como
agricultural
Twitch
crops grown
e
in space.
YouTube, né, e trazer também a parte de jogos aí também para vocês, né, inclusive mais na Twitch.
And also highlighting the scientific efforts from ESA and the Swedish Space Agency, let's start with MEMO-BC. This experiment aims to determine the direct and
E aí
delayed
estão alguns
post-flight effects
experimentos,
on
né,
the
que
neural
eles
cell,
vão realizar
on neural
ao
stem
longo
cells,
dessas
after
2
long-term
semanas
microgravity exposure, and
em
investigate if the
microgravidade.
delayed effects are the result of genetic changes emerging during microgravity,
Serão cerca
or to
aí
be
de
secreted
30
components in the medium during flight.
experimentos.
Dragon Freedom SpaceX on the big loop. Please confirm that you are ready for final approach and visors are down. MCCX and Houston have pulled go for docking.
E estamos aí autorizados para a acoplagem. Estamos então na fase final de aproximação. A Estação Espacial Internacional, neste momento, estamos aí autorizados para a acoplagem.
Copy, Dragon, go for docking. Ground will be enabling approach shortly. And a reminder, once you're inside the crew hands-off point, retreat and breakout are not permitted.
Faltando então aí menos de 12 minutos. É 12 minutos, quer dizer, 10 minutos, né, para a acoplagem. Nossa, que legal, fico feliz aí que vocês conseguiram ver o trenzinho aí do Starlink Eu ainda não consegui ver, não.
All right, so there on your screen, on the right-hand side of your screen, is our Crew Operations and Resource Engineer, or SpaceX Core, for tonight.
Eu já
That is
consegui
Seeley
observar uma
Grossman.
vez
We heard great
a
news being
Estação
given to
Espacial.
the AX-3 crew.
Quando eu estava
Their visors are now down,
em
and the
São
teams
Paulo,
in Houston are
né,
ready for them
na
to
manhã,
begin docking.
consegui
So
aí,
things are starting to get very
no início da
exciting.
manhã,
This
né,
is
consegui
basically
fazer
what
então
everything has been leading
aí a
to for the
observação
last
da
36
da
hours.
Estação
So
Espacial
we're very
Internacional.
excited for the AX-3 crew to get closer and closer to what will be their
Não
home
por
for
telescópio,
up
né,
to the
mas
next 14 days.
só no visual mesmo.
With that, let's go back over to Gary Jordan, who is at Johnson Space Center, and tracking the final movements of Dragon Freedom.
É porque a ISS, né, a Estação Espacial
Thank you, Kate.
Internacional, ela é
Right
do
on time. We're
tamanho de
about 2
campo
minutes away from waypoint
de
2's
futebol
arrival.
americano, né?
The teams
Então
here in
aí
Mission
a
Control
gente tem,
Houston
a
have
gente
worked in
consegue
tandem with the teams
pouco
over in
melhor,
Hawthorne.
né,
Both teams
visualizar
have
ela
pulled
do
go
que a
to proceed
Estação
past waypoint
Espacial
2 for
Tiangong, né,
docking.
que é um pouco menor.
Now, in this scenario, instead of a commanded hold at the waypoint 2 marker, which is 20 meters away from the International Space Station,
Estamos na guarda
the
aí do
Dragon
ponto
will
2,
make a brief pause
aí a 20
at that
metros
waypoint 2 mark.
de
Again, 20
distância, né,
meters,
mas já
only
temos,
for a
nós já
short
temos
couple of
então
seconds, just to
a
reconfigure its
autorização aí
software
para
to change for docking
o
mode.
dock, para a
So
acoplagem,
pause there for just a brief couple of seconds and then proceed inwards for docking.
mas o trezinho do Starlink ainda não consegui observar.
Away from the International Space Station now and closing. It's an orbital nighttime, so we're only going to see
7 horas e 36 minutos pelo horário de Brasília.
Docking light blinking once we get views from the International Space Station. Teams here in Mission Control Houston monitoring from the perspective of the International Space Station and the joint operations with the teams over in Hawthorne.
Eu aqui então durante as transmissões, né, eu não costumo muito aparecer, né, durante as transmissões, mas eu faço nos vídeos, né? Aí então eu faço a aparição aí nos vídeos aí de matemática e programação em Python.
And again, the teams have pulled go to
Porque eu gosto de dar destaque mais a parte da missão em si, né, do que a minha pessoa.
Not only are the teams you see here monitoring the approach of Dragon Freedom and the Axiom crew inside to the International Space Station, we also have NASA astronauts Laurel O'Hara and Jasmine Mogbelli inside the International Space Station
legal, né?
monitoring
Poder
the approach
ver
as well.
Aí por telescópio. Então já temos aí imagens da Dragon aí fazendo aí a sua queima aí bem no cantinho direito aí da sua tela. Aí estamos vendo aí a Dragon fazendo aí seu burn aí de navegação aí, né?
Again, we are in an orbital nighttime, so it is a bit dark.
Estamos aí na fase final, então, de aproximação aí, indo para o ponto 2.
On the camera.
Eu não sei se vocês conseguem ver aí, ó.
Confirmed waypoint 2 arrival. Dragon is now pausing and reconfiguring for its approach to the docking port.
Então, nesse momento, estamos no ponto 2 aí de aproximação. Estamos a 20 metros de distância. A Dragon ela tá bem ali no ponto aí acima do globo ali, né?
Station Houston on the big loop. Drag is on final approach and is go for docking. Monitor per steps 5 and 6 and 1.102. Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
E estamos aí pronto para a acoplagem.
Copies. We see vehicle mode approach to docking port range decreasing.
We copy.
Estamos agora então nos dirigindo para a acoplagem com a Estação Espacial Internacional.
Waypoint 2 pause is over and we're proceeding with final approach now inside 18 meters from the International Space Station.
Estamos a 18 metros da estação.
Copy.
Laurel O'Hara, NASA astronaut in the International Space Station, monitoring the approach. as the vehicle is just 15 meters away from the International Space Station where she
15
resides,
metros.
seeing the range rate, the rate of approach to dock with the International Space Station being as expected inside 15
Então, nesse momento
meters.
estamos aí a
and
15
closing.
metros da estação. Eu também não tenho aqui telescópio. Né? Se eu tivesse telescópio aqui, com certeza a gente iria fazer transmissões aí com telescópio também.
A little inside 13 meters, the range rate continues to decrease. That's as
13
expected.
metros.
Flight controllers are estimating just inside 3 minutes from contact with the International Space Station.
Estamos aí então a 13 metros da estação. 7 horas e 40 minutos. Estamos aí então no tempo esperado para a acoplagem. Olha, de Portugal, nossa, legal, obrigado aí. Pessoal aí de Portugal acompanhando aqui
Copy 10.
a transmissão, né? Fico bem feliz aí.
Dragon Commander Michael López-Alegría.
Pois é, o problema das grandes cidades é essa, né? Que é a poluição aí luminosa, né? Aqui eu ainda consigo, onde eu moro, né? No Rio de Janeiro, né?
Dragon
Ainda
continuing
consigo
its
ver,
approach as expected.
apesar de eu morar na
We may see a
grande
brief
cidade, né?
handover, a
Ainda
loss of
consigo ver
video for just a
ainda
couple of
alguma
seconds and
coisa, né?
regain
À
it.
noite
There's
e
a
de
chance we'll
madrugada
have it
também, que
continuously through
tem
this, but
baixa
if we do lose it, we
luminosidade,
will
né?
expect to regain
Eu
it
já
back by the
consigo
time
ainda
of contact.
ter alguma observação a olho nu. Então temos imagens da Dragon Freedom. Lembrando também que quiser seguir também nas redes sociais, né? Nós temos o nosso Instagram do canal e o X, né? E também nosso blog.
Copy 5 meters.
Também temos o nosso blog.
Inside 5 meters at the 2
5
meter mark, we
metros.
may hear the call out chop, crew hands off procedure.
Pena que tá
That
com imagens
point, crew
escuras
cannot
aí,
command
né?
the board.
Aí no lado noturno, aí da Terra.
Everything looking good though. Inside 4 meters.
4 metros.
meters.
Copy 2.
2 metros. Tivemos aí perda de comunicação. Vídeo.
Loss of signal as expected.
Bem na acoplagem, né? Bem no momento da acoplagem, a gente tem a perda de comunicação esperada.
Dragon SpaceX soft capture confirmed.
Confirmado então a acoplagem. Confirmado então a acoplagem. Às 7 horas e 42 minutos. Pelo horário de Brasília. Então aí temos a confirmação então da acoplagem realizada pela Dragon Freedom da missão AXIOM-3 na Estação Espacial Internacional.
You heard that call out from the Crew Operations Resource Engineer in Hawthorne, California, 4:42 a.m. Central Time. Dragon Freedom has made contact and soft capture with the International Space Station as the two were flying together 262 statute miles over the South Pacific Ocean.
Então a acoplagem foi realizada no
Ring retraction in
Pacífico
progress.
Sul. Então a acoplagem é às 7 horas e 42 minutos, confirmando aí, no Pacífico Sul.
With a good soft capture, the ring is now retracting, pulling Dragon closer in with the International docking adapter aboard the International Space Station. This is part of a series of steps to formally hard mate the Dragon to the International Space Station after the soft capture ring is fully retracted and bringing the Dragon inwards. There is a series of 12 hooks that will secure
É uma
Dragon
pena
to
que
the
não,
International Space Station for what's
no
called a
momento
hard
da
dock.
acoplagem
After
aí
that, the
tivemos aí
umbilical will be
a
deployed,
perda de sinal,
providing power
né? Aí
and
no momento
communications and
então aí
data
da
between the Dragon and
mais
the International
importante, né,
Space
que é a
Station.
acoplagem com a Estação
This is the
Espacial
docking sequence.
Internacional. Aí
Once the
tivemos
umbilical is extended and
aí
mated, the
esta
docking sequence is
perda de
complete.
imagens, né? Esperar. Estamos aí então no horário de Brasília, agora às 7 horas e
Again, that
44
soft capture
minutos.
time where Dragon made contact and a soft capture with the International Space Station, 4:42 a.m. Central Time. Station and Dragon were 262 statute miles over the South Pacific Ocean.
Então aí a captura então aí da contato então com a Dragon na Estação Espacial Internacional ocorreu aí às 7 horas e 42 minutos pelo horário de Brasília. Aí temos imagens então da Dragon já na Estação Espacial Internacional.
Ring retraction proceeding as expected, getting views from one of the cameras on the Japanese exposed facility on the forward end of the
E aí
space station.
temos
Seeing
então
the starboard
imagens da
side
Dragon
of the Dragon.
Freedom na Estação Espacial Internacional já
As we
acoplada.
continue to monitor the progress of this ring retraction, now getting
E
some
agora
sun
sim, o nascer do
illuminating
sol
the
aí
nadir or earth-facing
na
side,
estação.
and now the whole thing of Dragon
Imagens
Freedom.
aí já nítidas. Então aí confirmando aí no visual
Sun is rising
a,
over the South
a
Pacific Ocean.
Dragon
as
Dragon Freedom então na Estação
and International
Espacial
Space Station continue to
Internacional.
fly on a southeastern trajectory. Flight controllers monitoring the ring retraction and the alignment with the International docking adapter to proceed with driving those hooks. They'll be driven in 2 sets, gangs of 6, total of 12 hooks. They'll be driven again 6 at a time. The rated hook indicators are starting to form green, showing some good alignment, still tracking.
And Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, ring retraction is complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
Freedom, what's up?
Então, deixa eu mudar aqui, né?
Good milestone. The ring retraction is complete. We're seeing good alignment. This is quite a dance. It's not just the Dragon performing some of these maneuvers to secure Dragon to the International Space Station. International Space Station itself performing a series of attitude control configurations to prepare for the hard docking sequence. Once station's attitude control is configured properly, we'll go ahead and proceed towards the hard docking and driving those hooks. The teams you see here in Houston on the right and Hawthorne, California on the left work together to bring Dragon to the International Space Station. We're still going through the docking sequence to formally mate the Dragon with the International Space
Então, com essas
Station.
imagens,
Seeing good alignment with that ring
aí então
retraction
estamos
and looking forward to proceeding
aqui então
to that hard
encerrando
docking, driving those hooks.
a transmissão então de hoje aí da acoplagem então aí da Dragon Freedom na Estação Espacial Internacional pela AXIOM-3 às 7 horas e 42 minutos no sul do Oceano Pacífico, né? Então aí quero agradecer a todos pela grande audiência mais uma vez aqui no canal, né? Pelas novas inscrições, né? Que superamos aí a marca de 1.110 inscrições no canal. Quem ainda não se inscreveu no canal, né? Se inscreva, né? Deixa o like na transmissão, né? Lembrando também de seguir o canal nas redes sociais para não perder aí nenhum detalhe sobre a programação futura aí na estação, aqui no canal, tá? Lembrando que ainda não temos data de confirmação aí para a próxima missão Starlink, né? Assim que tiver a informação nova, né, será divulgada nas redes sociais e também, né, com um novo link aqui no canal, tá? Então, quero agradecer a todos então aí pela companhia de hoje, né? Então, muito obrigado. Desejo a todos um ótimo sábado e nos vemos numa próxima transmissão. Lembrando também de seguir o canal na Twitch, twitch.tv/willptv, onde então aí amanhã, domingo, teremos aí o programa Resumo das Missões. Aí onde então aí repassarei, né, tudo o que aconteceu ao longo desta semana. Tá? Então por hora é só, pessoal, e nos vemos em breve por aí.